Welcome back to 1834 Restoration House. In our previous video, we took you to the old 96 National Battlefield, and we showed you all kinds of interesting things, but one of the things we showed you was the road to Charlestown. Remember that? If you haven't seen it, go back and watch it. So that road leads right to here. This is Charlestown. As you can see, we're not standing in front of a Victorian house today. We're actually in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, normally when we do these field trips, we like to stay close to home, but today we've actually gone on the road 3 hours away from Greenville to the Charlestown Landing Historical State Park. Keep watching to the end and we'll share with you an update on the closing of our Victorian house. Nearby Charleston is actually a contraction of Charlestown. And this spot here is Charlestown, South Carolina. This was the first place that the British landed in South Carolina back in 1670. If you look behind me here, you'll see a body of water. Now we're so close to the coast, we have alligators here. We haven't come across any yet, but there's signs all over the place warning that they could be out there. Now we never see these in Greenville, thankfully, but you might want to keep an eye out.
We're at the location of the Horry Plantation House, well, what's left of it, and this may very well be the very first indoor bathtub ever in the United States. Notice it's made with brick, and then they lined it with stucco. This is the foundation of the Horry House, which burned down in 1865. This is a pretty big house for that time era. You can see here that there is one room where the bathtub was in. There's another big room over there on the other side of that. And then there's a really long one here. You can see the indentions in the ground. And then over here, you've got the fireplace and a round brick thing. What is that? Does anybody know? Let me know in the comments.
When the colonists arrived here in 1670, they encountered a friendly tribe of Indians, but they also discovered that there was an unfriendly tribe of Indians. Now, the unfriendly tribe of Indians was always harassing the friendly Indians, and they didn't like that. So they really liked it when the colonists showed up. Hey, we got some good friends here. These guys can help protect us. And so they encouraged the colonists to stay and build a fort right here. So you would think the first thing you'd want to do is build houses and gardens and things for life. But because of the threats in the area, they forgot all that. They all got together and they did nothing but build this wall around 9 acres of land, which encompassed their village. Once they did that, and then they were secure, then they could start building houses and start farming.
This is a replica of what to me looks like a kitchen garden, because it's fairly small, but it's well organized, easy to get to. So as the colonists got here, they didn't have a huge labor force, and the lord proprietors decided they needed more labor here. What they did was that they promised indentured servants of England that they could own land and slaves, and they would have full power over their slaves if they came here to work the land. So that was very encouraging to a lot of them. Many came. And on top of that, they were encouraged to grow a variety of things to see what grew well and what would be profitable. What do you think you would grow? There's sugar cane here, it says. This is indigo. Over here is marigolds, turnips, carrots. Looks like squash over there. Very nice. Sugar cane. I wouldn't have thought of that. I guess it would be a good thing here in the South though, huh?
I'm standing in front of a replica of a slave quarters. A lot of the colonists that first came over were actually indentured servants. Now, what does that mean? If you think back to your high school history class, some people wanted to come here, but they couldn't afford to. And so what they did is they signed up for a period of indentured servitude, and that meant that somebody else would pay their way to get over here. In return, they had to work for a landowner for a certain number of years to pay off that indentured servitude. After that, they were free to go and do whatever they wanted to do. There was a mixture of indentured servants and enslaved Africans who worked here as well. And so they had this common quarters that they built to house all of them. This is a replica of what they think that an original building might have looked like. So let's go inside and see what's happening. So what is this thing, a colonial jail? Actually, it's not. So this is an example of how they would have built some of the early colonial houses. They were really very simple. Trees, twigs, branches, whatever they could get their hands on is what they would use. And you can see here where they have woven the other twigs in between to form the walls. Now you can come back with mud, mortar, or some kind of chinking material that you can make up, whatever you have on site, and fill that in, and now you've got solid walls that keeps your weather out. This is all they had. That's probably why none of them survive to this day. Earlier we showed you the remains of a colonial plantation, and we showed you how big that was. Well, this was the typical size of a starter home in the colonies. After they got done weaving the twigs in between the walls, they would cover it up with mud, mortar, or stucco to get a finished wall like this and make it watertight. The early colonists got thirsty too. How would you like a nice glass of wine, or how about a swig of whiskey? Well, sorry, these barrels didn't contain either. These were powder kegs. Why? Because they needed something to put in their cannon. Now remember, just a few years before they got here, there was a war going on between the British and the Spanish. And there was kind of an uneasy peace going on here, and the British colonists, they weren't too thrilled about being put right in the midst of the Spanish people. They kind of feared for their lives a little bit. So naturally they wanted to defend themselves, and so they built themselves gun placements here, and they could shoot out there in case anybody tried to run up on them, and they would just take care of that real quick. This cannon still has a bore. I'll bet they could still fire this off. It even has a little hole for the wick. Actually, that's true. They do fire these cannons once in a while for special demonstrations. So they'll pack them full of black powder, light it off, and go boom. They don't put balls in them, obviously.
Some of these trees are hundreds of years old. This one's been stabilized with some cement. In between the crack here, you can actually see some little crabs. They're black. Pretty impressive. These trees have all this, it looks kind of like lichen or moss of some kind all over the trees, but I've been told not to touch them because they harbor a lot of little bugs, and you'll get them all over your hands and they get sticky and itchy.
The colonists didn't come here just for fun. As with a lot of things in life and in this world, many things are driven by profit, and this was no exception. This ship right here is a replica of a merchant ship. Now, the entire colony was created for one reason and one reason only, and that was to take advantage of natural resources here. The colonists were expected to work, and they were expected to load these ships up with whatever it was that they were making. In this case, it was wood for Barbados. In Barbados, they were raising sugarcane, and they needed that wood to burn and also to help to process the sugarcane into products that they could use. They sent a ship away one time empty. It ended up in Barbados with nothing in it. The owners were none too pleased when they found this out, so they sent a message back to the colonists saying very clearly, if another ship comes back here with nothing on it, there will be no more ships coming your way. Well, I think the colonists got the message loud and clear.
They would require 6 to 8 people to man this ship, depending on how long the voyage was. I can't imagine having that many people on a ship this size. It just doesn't seem that big. Wow. They've done a really good job of replicating it. It looks beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
This is what they call the School of Hard Knots. "5 years after they arrived, they discovered that their commercial endeavors weren't working. The crops weren't growing like they hoped, and things just weren't working out. So 5 years after they arrived, they closed down the colony and left. Well, ironically, about 20 years later, some other folks came along and they discovered all these marshy areas out here were perfect for growing rice. Well, that was quite an adventure, wasn't it? So we ended up getting pushed out by a rainstorm. As you can see, it's starting to rain right now and probably will be raining much heavier soon. I think there's a tropical storm headed this way. But at the beginning of the video, we promised you that we'd give you an update on the house. So when we last left you, we were waiting for the appraiser's report to come in. Well, the report came in and it showed that there was no heat on the upper floors. The lenders were not able to lend on the house under those conditions because of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac regulations. And they tried really hard to find any way that we could get around that loophole. But at the end of the day, there just was no way to make that loan work. So what they did is they passed us off to another lender who can do more creative financing of sorts. And they found a way to get this done quickly, easily, and painlessly. At this point in time, we're hoping, cross our fingers, this may be the last video before you see the house again. In other words, we may close on July 1st, so we're hoping the very next video you see after this will be of us taking possession of the house. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on 1834 Restoration House.